Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Property Doctor podcast with me, your host, Dr. Andrew Threadgold. This week is a little bit special for me because it's Dr. Gabriella Day on the podcast. Now, a lot of you will say, well, who's Dr. Gabriella Day? Well, let me tell you, Gabby and I went to medical school together all those years ago from about 1996. She lived on the floor above me in our halls of residence, and she was in the same friendship group. And as the years have gone by and we left medical school, kind of our paths never really crossed again, and we lost touch until recently. Now, Gabby's had a very interesting career, and of late is now a published author, having released a book called In Defence of the Realm. So, anyway, I'll let Gabby tell us all about that, but without further ado, let's get on with the show. Hi, and welcome to the Property Doctor podcast with me, your host, Dr. Andrew Threadgold. This week is really special for me because we're catching up with a very old friend of mine. I've not seen Dr. Gabriella Day for probably 20 years, there or thereabouts. We were at medical school together, spent a lot of years in each other's company, and we've kind of lost touch since then until now. So this is the first time I've seen Gabby in about 20 years since I left medical school. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Gabby's been up to. She's a very entrepreneurial person in her own right, a published author, no less. And her book is fantastic, In Defence of the Realm. But I'm sure Gabby will tell us all about that in her own words sooner than later. So before we go any further, how are you doing, Gabby?
I'm good, and you don't look a day older. You look just the same as when we were in. It was probably in Morris Hall, wasn't it?
South
Playing
Woodford.
a bit of guitar on
Oh,
TV.
I play a lot less guitar now than I did back then.
Oh, you need to get it out again. It's good. Well, no, I do remember that. They were good times. They were good times. I mean, I have to say, I remember doing A levels, and it was blooming stuff. You do all those GCSEs, don't you? It's like your whole life is riding on your GCSEs. And you get through those, and then you're doing A levels, and that's really intense. And I was talking about having a gap year. And I remember one of my teachers saying to me, university won't be as tough as this, don't you? And the teacher was so right. I mean, yes, of course, we had to do the work, and I think the clinical years obviously were different than the preclinical years, but we had a good time.
Yeah, that first year in Halls was probably my favourite of all the years at medical school. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah,
There was such camaraderie, wasn't there?
yeah, yeah. It was
Yeah,
a real. I mean, it's so much goes on in those 6 years, doesn't it? There's a lot of dehumanizing stuff that goes on, and an awful lot of indoctrination into the system that, this is how we do things. And
very much.
as we were sort of talking about before, so going off the beaten track is frowned upon.
Yeah.
If you decide to do things differently, I don't know whether people perceive it as an insult to them, but when you try and do things differently, people don't like it. They feel really threatened. And yeah,
I mean, I mean, the first experience I had with that, and I was nowhere near emotionally prepared. I wasn't worldly wise enough at 18 from a little village in the northwest of England, and we got bussed out of on our first days. We got bussed out of the halls of residence in South Woodford into Whitechapel, and I don't know if you remember, but they basically told us you will have to drink. You won't get in any of the sports teams unless you drink. We've got drinking clubs, and we don't want you messing about with any other subject students, only medics. And of course, we followed suit, and that led on to me drinking very heavily all the way through to 2009. And in the end, I got to the point in 2009 that enough was enough, and I stopped drinking. I've not had a drink since then. But that drinking behavior that I had was directly as a result of the
yeah.
indoctrination into drinking that you had to have as a
I mean,
bloke in that
it
medical
was
school.
so much a part of the culture. Yeah,
Mm.
it was absolutely, and of course, yeah, it then becomes a coping mechanism, doesn't it? Because I mean, if you're not allowed to de-stress from stressful clinical experiences by actually saying that affected me actually, that really upset me. I'm struggling to deal with that.
Mm.
Instead, you have a drink. That's a really unhealthy coping mechanism right from the beginning, isn't it?
Yeah.
And psychologists, they have to have supervision. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. If you do a day in general practice, constant appointments, just like that, over and over. Everybody, not everybody, some people come in and they give you a bit of a boost, but you get sort of patient after patient coming in and dumping their stuff. And of course, it's okay. We all need to offload stuff. So if you have one or two people who offload stuff onto you, and there's some more stuff that is kind of more mundane stuff, and it's okay. It's a mix. But of course, at the moment, it's more and more dump, 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 dump. And at the end of the day, you don't even know what's your stuff and what's their stuff. It's just so much stuff
Yeah.
going on in your head, that you can't sort it out. And psychologists, they have a limit to the number of patients they'll see, and then they'll talk to their supervisor about all of it. But we don't need that because we're tough, aren't we? We're tough and resilient. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why everybody's burning out all over the place. So
Yeah.
I talk about in my book actually. One of the chapters is called Jumping Through Hoops. So, as doctors, obviously we've done reasonably well in school. How do you do reasonably well in school? Well, people tell you what to do. You do as you're told. So they
Mm.
say hoop and you jump through the hoop, and then they say, here's another one, and it's a bit higher, and you jump through it and you jump through it, and you realize that you're actually quite good at jumping through hoops, and you feel good because when you jump through the hoop, you get the positive feedback, and
Yeah.
so you keep doing it. And then you go to medical school, and obviously you keep on jumping through the hoops, and then you automatically move on to your specialism and whatever. You keep jumping through hoops, and you just get in the habit of that you jump through hoops. And then one day you kind of go, "Oh, hang on a minute, why am I jumping through these hoops? This is not even something I believe in some of the time, and I'm just jumping through the hoops for the sake of it." But you're so busy jumping through the hoops that you don't even stop to think about it, do you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's expected, it's the norm. That's what you do.
Yeah. And then so some people realize that actually, I'm not dealing with this well, and they might go off sick. But everybody else is like, oh, they went off sick, they couldn't cope with it. Oh, but I can cope with that. I'm okay. So constantly just raising the bar. So you make everything harder because, oh, I can deal with it. Can you not deal with it? I can deal with it. I'm
Yeah, yeah.
so of course it just gets the expectation gets higher and higher and higher because rather than saying this is a load of rubbish, um, why are we all killing ourselves?
Yeah. And the ones that are still at work, sickness presence is a a big problem in GP land, in doctors in general. People at work who shouldn't be at work because they mentally might not be right, or they might have an illness that should otherwise they should be at home, but instead they still go to work because they're duty bound. They don't want to, appear that they can't cope, or they don't want to put their workload onto somebody else. So they still go to work under duress without
Yeah,
saying anything to anybody. And that's just a bad sign, because then they won't perform as well. They won't feel good about doing their job. They'll feel worse about themselves.
yeah.
And it's a vicious cycle, isn't it?
And the number of times that you'd be in a consultation with a patient telling you symptoms, and you're thinking, uh, I'm actually more ill than you. And I remember one specific consultation where I mean, I did have a migraine aura where I lost vision, and the guy I was with at the time, I was like, I'm really sorry, I can't see like part of you.
He
And
wouldn't have been bothered.
he,
I bet he wasn't bothered.
no, no, he was all right
Oh,
actually.
was he?
But one I remember, I wear contact lenses, and when you get something in your contact lens, and you're like, oh, that's a bit sore, and then you're like, oh, it's really, really sore, and then there's tears like coming down your face, and I'm there going, I'm sorry, I've got a contact lens problem, and he just kept talking, kept talking, and you're like, it's like, what is this? Do you have no kind of, it's dehumanizing patients as well. And this is media, and we've got like Tesco's. You can go in the middle of the night. You can go whenever you want. You just do your click and collect order. It just turns up. You pay your money. You get what you pay for. You pay less than it's actually worth because we're exploiting farmers and all of that stuff. But it's been pushed and pushed and pushed that medicine can be the same.
Mm.
So any doctor can turn up and deal with your problem. And then they turn up and they say, haven't you read my notes? And
Yeah.
do you have any idea how much stuff is in your notes? It's like reams and reams and reams. And I'm always like, well, Because I've seen patients that have, as a GP, they've gone into hospital with a problem and they come out and they're at home and you're asked to visit them and they say, I've got this problem. And you go, but weren't you just in hospital for that? Yeah, they completely ignored it. They put me on the chest pain pathway and then they told me wasn't having a heart attack and they sent me home, but I still got the pain in my ankle.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it's just, yeah, it's so nonsensical, the system. Sorry, I've kind of gone off on
No,
on a
I love it. But and then following on from that, then you get the media agenda that GPs do nothing. They refer everybody to everywhere. They don't ever solve any problems. And then you think to yourself, well, actually, 90% of all the NHS consultations that are done in general practice. Now imagine if I referred every person with anxiety to a psychiatrist, every person with diabetes to a diabetologist, every person with high blood pressure to a cardiologist. Imagine if everything got referred out and I literally did nothing. What a state the NHS would be in then. The waiting list would explode, and you'd go to see that one person, and they wouldn't be able to look after your, sore ankle at the same time as your blood pressure. So, and you'd have to coordinate and collate all your monthly prescriptions between the different specialties, and all your hospital letters you'd have to do yourself every month. People have no idea
yeah.
the
And
role of
it's,
the generalist.
it's like Catch 22. You know the book Catch 22. So that he's an air soldier in flight. What do you call them? I don't know. Flies planes.
Pilot.
Um, like that's the one. Well done. Well done. You're doing well.
Good job, I'm here.
Anyway, so the idea is that if you want to fly. I can't remember how it is, but basically, if you're signed off sick because you don't want to fly, then you're sane, so therefore you're fit to fly. But if you want to fly, you're insane. It's catch 22. So
Mm,
basically, you can't win, and that's the situation in general practice because we're judged on patient satisfaction.
hmm
And patients want us to prescribe more, refer more, do more sick notes, and spend more time with them. But on the other hand, we're supposed to be prescribing less, referring less, and keeping to time and being productive and seeing many, many, many more
Yeah,
patients
and policing the sick notes.
and policing the sick notes, not having everybody off sick all the time. So yeah, it's like, well, clearly we can't win because you can't tick. It's actually not physically possible. Like, and who are we actually supposed to be serving in this situation? Are
Mm,
we supposed to be serving the pharmaceutical companies who say that patients have to be on all of these medications? Are we supposed to be actually managing the budget, or are we actually supposed to be dealing? And I personally think we're there to act in the best interest of the patient. And of course, that doesn't always mean giving them a sick note. That's something that I've been thinking about recently is the number of people we're consigning to the scrap heap.
mm,
Because, people seem to be increasingly disempowered. They just have this impression. Um, I mean, COVID didn't help with this because of all the fear it generated and the anxiety. And then people think that they can't cope. And then they go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, yes, you're suffering with this and you need this medication, rather than saying, actually, it's understandable that you're feeling like this. And actually, I think we can work through it. And I think we want to be making people stronger, more resilient, not unfeeling, but able to kind of pursue what they want in life. And instead, we facilitate them. Basically, we medicate them. They say the medication doesn't work. Well, of course, it doesn't work, does it? Because I mean, the serotonin theory of depression isn't actually correct. I mean, sometimes they help. Sometimes they help a bit, but they're not the answer, are they? So we put them on the medication, that doesn't work, and then they want a sick note to be off work. And absolutely, there's times when you need a period of time off work, but of course, we should then be working towards, okay, what am I going to do to get back into some form of work? Because clearly it's not good to be doing nothing. But we basically compound the idea for them that there's nothing that they can do, that they're disempowered, that they're victims,
mm,
that they're not going to get better, and we facilitate that. And of
mm,
course, it's really worrying because the economic situation is not going to get better anytime soon. And they're cracking down, and I think people being on benefits at the moment, often people think they're better off on benefits than working. But if your benefits become conditional, if they replace it with universal basic income, and then you have to meet certain criteria, you do have to do certain things, behave in a certain way, or eat certain foods, because if we go sort of all digital with currencies and things like that, if you go into one of those Amazon shops and your NHS is linked up to your bank account, so your medical record, and they know you're diabetic, and you try to buy something free, and it says you're not allowed to because you're diabetic. So things can become conditional. So it's really dangerous, and I think that's one of the reasons that I've come out of. I was a partner until a couple of years ago, but I actually want to be able to maintain my independence and not be bribed into doing certain things,
Yeah.
not having the way I manage patients determined by an algorithm. The NHS 10-year plan, I think, is absolutely terrifying, because to me, what it sounds like is control. It's like, if you do as we want you to, if you do the correct thing according to the protocols, the algorithms, then you'll get more money. And if you don't, then you'll get less money. And so
Mm.
be a good boy or girl, jump through the hoops that we've set, and we will reward you. Step off the beaten track and do things a little bit differently, and you will be sanctioned.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, if you've got your own business, I mean, there's some bureaucracy in that as well,
Yeah. Very much.
but at least you do have some independence, I think. So,
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, there's so much in what you've said there that to unpick as well, from the fact that we are complicit in their behaviors. They come in, we medicate them, but actually, instead of saying we could work through it, they don't. A lot of patients don't want to work through it. They want a quick answer, a magic bullet usually. And then there's the other part of that about, medicines don't work. If medicines worked as well as society thinks they work, then there wouldn't be all the numbers needed to treat data that they publish. And so statins, great example. I think the number needed to prevent one heart attack with statins is something like 15,000. So you've got to treat 15,000 patients with statins every day.
it's easy, because you can just give it to everybody or put it in the water. It's fine.
Exactly, but the guideline says you've got to do it. And who writes the guidelines? Nice. Who influences? Nice. I wouldn't like to say, but I bet there's somebody from the drug companies that make statins that influence the guidelines somewhere.
And the same companies own the pharmaceutical companies that own the food companies that are selling us the rubbish that we're eating as well. And for all the medicine that we have, are we fitter and healthier and happier?
We're living longer,
And
but
how
I
much?
don't know if we're fitter and healthier.
When I look around, I don't see. You've seen the photos, haven't you, of like in the 70s, people on the beach, and
Yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah.
and then now you look and everybody's
Much
overweight.
bigger.
And there's this concept of being fat and malnourished.
Yeah.
So you're getting loads of calories. You eat, and your body keeps telling you you're hungry because it hasn't got all the basic nutrients it needs, because the quality of our food has gone like that, and what's available. And we've been told that sugar substitutes are good, which clearly they're not. A lot of them are carcinogenic, aren't they? And
Mm.
our bodies are not designed to cope with significant amounts of sugar. We should, Stone Age man would have had a lot of sugar in the form of fruit in the autumn and fattened himself up a bit to survive the winter. We don't have that problem these days, but we still
No.
have the sugar addiction, and so we've got an epidemic of obesity. But often these obese people are actually malnourished at
Yeah.
the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
mean, how much vitamin supplements do we have to prescribe and all the rest of it?
and of course, that's not what I don't think that's what the NHS should be dealing with, is problems of basic lifestyle and diet. And we
Mm.
don't have the capacity, clearly, do we? We don't have the capacity to explain to everybody a healthy diet, and especially not if we're sending them one message and they go out on the street, and what do they see? But a load of rubbish they can fill themselves with, which is cheaper. And of course, if you haven't got much money, you're going to, and that's another, the economic situation I mean, there are so many mechanisms of taking money away from us, aren't there? The
Oh,
economy
yes.
economy was kind of designed to move money from the poor to the rich. It's set up that way. Um, and so you're kind of taxed from every angle, but we do it to ourselves as well because we get our Tesco reward card. I don't have one, club card, sorry. And then you go, oh, I'll go to Tesco's because I'll get money off. And I mean, it makes me sick. If you go into Tesco's and Sainsbury's and places now, everything costs less if you've got a reward card, doesn't it?
Right.
Go in and basically they're bribing you to buy their food, and then they say every little helps. It's a help, and it's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. I had a conversation with a lady in Sainsbury's at the checkout because it drives me mad. Self-checkout. Why should I self do it myself? Why should I do it myself? The checkout, they had jobs doing this, and now you've taken all their jobs away, and I have to, and invariably, if I go through the self-checkout, I have to have help because I used to have help just because I was useless, but now I kind of make sure that I need help. Mess it up. They always say, don't they? If you so actually, my ex, when he was doing A&E, he's orthopedic now, and when he was doing A&E, the nurses would bring him an ECG to look at, and he would say, lines and lines and lines, and they'd take it off him and give it to so sometimes it's just best to act really stupid and then people don't ask you to do things. But so there was this girl at the checkout, and the person in front took forever, and I was standing there very patiently with loads and loads of empty self-checkouts, but I wasn't going to use those because I'm going to use my cash and I'm going to use the person at the till, and then I always tell them thank you, and that it's all about jobs and stuff. But when I got there, she said to me, oh, I'm sorry you had a long wait. And I said, oh, that's okay, don't worry. I said, it's a shame that they can't put more people on the tills though, isn't it? So that you don't have to apologize. And she said, they can't afford to. It's because of the national insurance contributions rise that the government's done. So the supermarket can't afford to pay more people to be on the checkouts. I was like, they can afford it. She said, no, they can't. No, they can't. It's all over the news. They can't afford it. It's because of the government. And you're like, you're sitting there defending, like, imagine the profits of this company.
Yeah.
You are being exploited by them, probably not being paid very well, defending them because they say that they can't pay more people to be on the checkouts because of the national insurance contribution.
Yeah.
I mean, that just makes me so sad because, it's the actual people being exploited that yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right with, I mean, in examples like Sainsbury's as the Tesco, the big companies, it's the medium-sized companies that have really been hit by that. I mean, I own a few of them, and we have been really badly affected by that budgetary change and the NI changes and the cost of employing people. But for the big companies, like they're just using it as an excuse to get rid of people, really.
they are. And of course, who's the government working for? Are they working for us or are they working for the people who are lining their pockets?
Hmm.
So you've got global corporations with I mean, I'm rubbish at anything financial and economic, but more bigger GDP than countries.
Yeah.
Like, countries don't actually mean very much anymore. They don't have influence. It's these massive corporations that have the influence.
Yeah, BlackRock is the biggest one in property. Big news at the moment in property. BlackRock, the story of BlackRock and the book that the founder wrote, starting from essentially nothing and building this huge corporation. It's a fantastic story. But BlackRock now own out of every four houses bought, normal residential homes, out of every four residential homes bought in America, BlackRock own one. So they own a quarter of all US real estate, and now via Lloyd's Bank and other household names that we know, all banks are buying up residential homes in the UK now.
And then the same happens with farming as well. So farmland, this is happening in India, isn't it? That farmland
Mhm.
is basically being taken over by these massive corporations.
Yeah,
And a lot of these massive corporations are using GM foods and things like glyphosate. So there's a brilliant video by Dr. Zach Bush, Chemical Farming and the Harms to Human Health.
right.
You know, So basically, the food that we're eating that is mass produced is basically force grown with things glyphosate, which is toxic for us. So we're just consuming this food that's full of toxins. So as a medical profession, we're seeing more and more kind of vague disease. It's not straightforward illness now. It's all kind of vague. So much more chronic fatigue and POTS and different kind of just vague and insidious illness that you can't really, for one, you can't really pin it down very well. It's hard to make a formal diagnosis. So we have no effective treatments for them. But a lot of it is due to just, poisoning in the water, poisoning in the food.
Yeah.
Plus,
Yeah. Testosterone in men. The estrogenization of our environment is reducing testosterone levels in blokes. There won't be, I've mentioned this to a doctor I spoke to on a previous podcast episode, that testosterone replacement therapy is now a thing. It was always a thing, but I see that that's going to be the next big thing in private healthcare, because the testosterone levels of the male population have plummeted year on year, and they're getting to the point where TRT will be, testosterone replacement therapy will be at some point available on the national health, just like HRT is for ladies, because it's getting to the point where the testosterone levels will be so low for so many people.
and fertility going down as well.
Yeah.
But this is like, they call them endocrine disruptors, don't they? Plastics, microplastics, everything that is interfering with our hormonal cascades. And to me, it doesn't make sense. You've got a problem with your hormonal cascade, which is due to interference in your enzyme processes, blockage of the enzymes with heavy metals, plastics, glyphosate, whatever it is, blocking your enzymes. And then you end up with a deficiency of the end hormone. So then you go, well, that's okay. We'll just slap on some hormone. That will sort that out.
Double patch this week.
Of course, they're growth promoters, these hormones. So they increase your risk of cancer. Anything that's a growth promoter will increase your risk of cancer. So like, we don't go, well, hang on a minute, maybe we should try and prevent having plastic in the water. And and again, the emphasis is all on us. We should be using less plastic. We should be doing that. But of course, if you want to earn a living, you have to go to work, to try and work the number of hours that you need to work to earn a living. And if you, heaven forbid, you might have kids as well that you're trying to raise, and then try and go and buy food that's not all wrapped. I mean, basically, the supermarkets wrap everything in plastic. And again, but they don't get the blame. They don't bear the brunt of it. It's just the ordinary man and woman who's like, you're using too much plastic, you're driving too much, you're breathing too much, stop breathing, you're using up too much oxygen. Like, what the Serenity Prayer, isn't it, says at the end, you're a child of the universe, you have a right to be here, no less than the moon and the stars, you have a right to be here. And sometimes it doesn't feel like it at the moment. It feels like, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm taking up too much space.
Yeah.
Patients are going, get out, get out. We want that space as well. So
yeah, it's crackers. It's absolutely crackers. How did you, so we've kind of completely circumvented how you ended up where you are now. So you went to medical school, you did a medical set of jobs.
yeah, so I did a medical rotation because I did enjoy medicine. I like the diagnostic process. It's quite interesting, it's like detective work. So I enjoyed that. But basically, any of the specialties, they didn't. I was like, well, yeah, it'd be interesting for a bit. But then you've got gastroenterology, where you're going to stick things up people's bums the whole time. It's like, well, the odd time might be okay, but I don't want to be doing that every day. And then respiratory, you're going to stuff, bronchoscopies and deal with their sputum all the time, or
Yeah.
whatever thing it is. It was just like, well, I don't want to be doing that all the time. And I really wanted to deal with the whole person, the person who is suffering with the illness rather than the disease. I know all about pneumoconiosis, or
Ooh, fancy words.
yeah, I remember that in the dim and distant past. Yeah, so there were all of these different. My dad was a GP. His parents were both vets. My uncle was a vet. And so I kind of decided I wanted to deal with the person, and try and help the person fundamentally with whatever things were affecting them. So I went into general practice and then fairly quickly realized that it didn't have all the answers,
Yeah.
funnily enough. Like
Yeah.
there's not a pharmaceutical solution to everything because we're not actually, we don't come into life with a statin deficiency or a medicine. Conventional medicine doesn't have all the answers. And so my grandma, we had a German part of the family, and my grandma went. They were over there, and she was bitten by a horsefly and had a big reaction. And Uncle Bernhard gave her some belladonna and homeopathic belladonna, and it just all melted away. So she came back and started using homeopathy with animals. And then my uncle Chris, he trained as a vet conventionally, and then started doing just alternative stuff, so acupuncture, chiropractic, homeopathy. He was quite incredibly pioneering. I mean, my grandma was very pioneering as well because she was one of the first female vets. She was born in India, and she had to have her tonsils out. And she said to me, this was after my dad died, and she was struggling, and she said to me, when they took my tonsils out on the kitchen table in the house, said they tied my hands together, and I was so cross because I would not have moved.
Wow.
Yeah, she was quite a lady. And anyway, so yeah, so I started training in the homeopathy, and it just really makes you much more interested in the person. And I was really interested in like, where is your illness coming from? So I'm in the book. I'll just show it, In Defense of the Realm.
Absolutely.
So in defense of the realm is your mind, body, and soul. So we're not just a physical body. If we were just a physical body, then yeah, okay, the drugs might have all the answers because all you need to do is, look at the receptors and apply the correct drug, and it's all straightforward. But we're not. We're a mind, body, and soul. In fact, we're a soul which has a body to kind of express itself with in this material world. But we know, chaos theory, if a butterfly flaps its wings somewhere, it causes a thunderstorm somewhere else. We know how complex things are. So when we interfere with the system, it has knock-on effects elsewhere in the system.
Hmm.
So if you've got, I read a brilliant book called Sick and Tired by Dr. Nick Reed, and it was full of examples of how people are in some difficult situation and they maybe develop inflammatory bowel disease, and it's really difficult to treat. And then for some reason, something happens and they change their situation. They're not in that difficult situation anymore, and the inflammatory bowel disease just goes away. No, it's gone. So
Hmm.
we know there's absolutely no doubt that there's a complex interplay. And the trouble is, if we ignore the mind and the soul, we're not going to get on top of the problem. It's like Jack in the Box. So if you're trying to suppress something, you push it back in, it just pops out somewhere else. So if you're just suppressing this illness, the stress in the system is just going to come out somewhere else. So we need to start paying attention to the whole system, and that's
Mm.
kind of homeopathy teaches you that. A lot of the complementary therapies teach you that. Um, but I also, just saw, I mean, looking at dynamics in relationships is really interesting, because I had so many patients who would come in and they were feeling low, they were, exhausted, depressed, anxious or whatever. And when they would tell their story, because you're kind of like, well, why is this? And they go, oh, I don't know. But if you kind of dig, then you discover that they're in a really abusive situation. And so they then, they want some medication for you to kind of fix them because
Yeah.
they're not. And you're like, but it's the relationship. They shouldn't be behaving like that to you. So why am I medicating you? It's them that needs to be sorted out, not you. So you
Mm.
kind of need to address these dynamics. And if we don't, I mean, I think that's where we are now, is that we need to be really looking at dynamics between people, because abuse is there's I don't know if it was Anton Chekhov as a play with three people. I think it's three women, and they're talking, and it's basically all a power struggle. But the games that they use, because it's like, oh, I'm not as strong as you are, and all of these kind of manipulative things that people do. And sometimes one of the chapters in the book is, I use the analogy of a spider. Sometimes you have you'll have seen this in, in general practice and places. You have somebody who, they're the victim, and that, they're in their bed because they've got this terrible illness, and so they need a lot of help. So all the family are running around tending to their every need. And if one of the family is like, oh, I need to go out, they're like, oh, okay, well, you go out and leave me here by myself. I'll be okay. I'll survive. And the person's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't go because like they really need me. Where is the power in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just pulling all the strings. And if we don't sort of see that, when we look at the demand in general practice, I really feel like the whole health service at the moment seems to be becoming more and more demand-led rather than need-led. We're not, so we're ignoring elderly people in their homes. They're not allowed to see a doctor now, are they? Because the government has paid for allied professionals to go out to do that job, and doctors can't go out, so they can't see a doctor. But they're the ones who are actually, for one, they've paid their taxes for years and years and years. They've barely ever gone to the doctor, and then they might turn up for a face-to-face appointment. They can't walk in and they're yeah, I've left it till now because I didn't want to bother you. And you're just patient that you go in to visit at home, and you're like, but you're blue. Oh, it's okay. And they're like, no, it's not. And then you've got other people coming in. I mean, some of the stuff, and I always think, there's a lot of need in the so there's so much anxiety and disempowerment that we've got lots and lots of people who basically, I think you'll recognize this concept, is that there are so many people who are so afraid of dying that they're not living.
Mm.
All of their time in the GP practice worrying about minor symptoms, and they're not actually living their lives. And I say, if we were to go to war, who's going to go? Because
Yeah.
there don't seem to be many people fit enough to actually, fight a fight. And yeah, I mean, if we retain our humanity, surely, I mean, if you think about sort of COVID, Jesus went to visit lepers. What are we if we don't see people, we don't interact with people in case we might die? I mean, we may as well just die now, hadn't we? Like, what's the
Yeah.
point of being here if we're not going to live our lives? Sorry,
Yeah.
that was a bit of a waffle.
No, it's absolutely phenomenal. There's so much, again, so much in it. You immediately made me think when you were talking about the elderly, or the person that's always pulling the strings at home. There's, preventing people from doing stuff because they're too ill. It immediately made me think of a few patients of my own. There was one lady called, we'll call her Dorothy for the
Yeah,
purposes of this. And she had her daughter-in-law was her carer, and her daughter-in-law never left her side for years and years, and then eventually wanted to go away for I think it was a Wednesday and a Thursday midweek, just to get some respite, and had made sure that the other people would pop in and see her. She went, left on the Wednesday morning, and then we got a home visit request at maybe 10 o'clock on that Wednesday morning that Dorothy had taken a turn. So I went and did the home visit, and I got there, and the daughter-in-law was back, because she'd been summoned. She'd had this bad turn. It just so happens it was the day that the daughter-in-law left, for some respite. So the daughter-in-law came back, and essentially it was all a big ruse because she didn't feel that she wanted the daughter-in-law to leave her.
yeah,
And the daughter-in-law felt really guilty that the doctor had to come out. So it was this whole dynamic. And there's so much of that in the web of, and
there
all
is.
all that stuff that happens across the country all the time.
Yeah.
It's
And I think so something that I talk about in my book quite a lot is that whether or not you're religious, if you've grown up in the West and you've been educated in the West, you're heavily indoctrinated by the church. It's just in the culture. Even if you've rejected it, you're heavily indoctrinated by it. And the Bible was put together about 400 AD by the Romans, who wanted to control everybody. So what do you put in the Bible? You put stuff that will tell people, do as you're told. It's noble to suffer. If you suffer lots in this life, you'll go to heaven. So basically, that's what you're indoctrinated with is that, oh, I should suffer. Jesus died on the cross for me, so I must suffer. Of course, Jesus didn't die on the cross to tell us that we needed to suffer. He died on the cross to show us that death isn't the end and that, that there's life beyond death. But the bits that made it into the Bible told us, do as you're told, do as you're told in this life. It's noble to suffer. And so people kind of think that it's their duty to suffer for other people, and it makes them a good person. Of course, it doesn't necessarily make you. Yes, it's good to do things for other people and benefit other people and we should do that where we can. But of course, if it's enabling them to continue behaving in a really bad way, and this is another thing we're doing in general practice and in the NHS, is allowing people to behave really, really badly. Now, that's not teaching us to defend our own realm, and it's also not encouraging them on their spiritual journey to address some of their karma that they're going to have to deal with. We're actually colluding with them and enabling them to stay in a pathological situation. So if in this situation with the daughter-in-law, if she said, actually, no, I'm not coming back, I've had enough, mum, mum's behavior would go, she'd have a proper tantrum and
Oh, yes.
all her toys out the pram.
That is exactly what happened the next time.
Was it? Yeah.
Mm.
So that all escalates. And then either you give in and then they learn, oh, when I have a tantrum, that works. So they just keep doing it. But if you don't give in, then either they find someone else to serve that function, that prop function of propping them up and making them feel good, or they have to change their behavior. Because if you change what you do in response to somebody, it's like it's one of the laws of reactivity, isn't it? And every action has a reaction. So if you change your response to something, it changes something in them as well.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, very true. And actually, so we had a plan to manage that person, and then um, I was encouraging. So but my role in this was because I knew the lady and I knew the daughter-in-law. So my role in this little entanglement was to try and manage the detachment or the distance acquisition, if you like, to try and
yeah.
give them space and teach the elderly person who really didn't have much in the way of illness at all that she was fine, and to reassure the daughter-in-law that she was fine, go and live some of your life, and that was this. And this is something that they don't teach you in medical school, that these are the jobs that you do as a GP. So we'd done quite well with that, and then the daughter went away again. I was on holiday, came back, and saw that there was a locum in replacing me, and the locum got called out on the home visit, and the locum went out, and rather than manage the situation, had decided to medicate the situation with some lorazepam and stuff. And then that led on to this whole new line of dependency on the surgery to have medicines in case and all the rest of it. And it just kind
Did you
of,
get the papers?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do, isn't it? And then everybody jumps. And we, have this thing that we don't want to upset anybody. We don't want to trigger anyone. And of course, what all we're doing is colluding in their dysfunctional behavior. I put a post on LinkedIn the other day that I thought some people might engage with, but they didn't really, saying, do you ever avoid saying something to somebody that you think might help them move forward in case you trigger them? And a couple of people who I think were more coaches rather than doctors.
I wrote a reply and then deleted it.
Oh, did you?
I can't remember what it was now, but I wrote a reply and thought, maybe that's a bit too.
Yeah, it's really difficult because again, so this is the difference between being nice and being kind. Like we can avoid triggering people, but of course, Rumi says the wound is the place where the light enters you. So where your trigger is where your healing is as well.
Right.
If we just avoid people's triggers, we're not enabling them to move forward. And what we do is we do everything else that we can, make life easier for them, all of this stuff, which is all encouraging them to believe that they don't have the capacity to move forward from this, and that they're a victim. I don't know the name of the book, and I should have read it, but there's a book that somebody in America wrote about, basically being a victim is, don't be a victim, because if you're a victim, you have no power over your
Mm.
situation. And when you realize that actually you're not the victim, you have agency, you can change things. Of course, when you make changes, there's risk in making changes. If you If you just,
Actually, there's a lot of discomfort in making changes that can feel risky to you. But actually, if you think about the level of risk that's involved, genuine risk, there's not much, unless you're doing something very out there. But it's the discomfort people feel
yeah.
really afraid of.
Yeah, so there will be some discomfort when you make
Mm,
changes. It causes waves. Other people don't like it. You might have reservations. Often it's some ingrained belief that you've got that stops you making it. I should suffer. I should suffer, so I must carry on doing this job because it's my duty to suffer and it makes me a good person. And it's not actually true. But if we start making if you always do as you're told, if you follow the algorithms in medicine and something goes wrong, it's like, well, I followed the algorithms and everyone, oh yes, you did everything right. Um, to have the courage to say, actually, I don't think the algorithm, my next book coming out is heart-based medicine and a lot based on the visiting service that I did for a while in Southampton. Um, you know, there are so many times when just doing what looks right on the protocol is not in the patient's best interests.
yeah.
When you call out an ambulance for somebody because, they're 90, 95 and they've had some chest pain or something, and the relative calls up because they're, oh, they've got a bit of discomfort and it'd be nice if the doctor can, and the doctor just goes, chest pain, call an ambulance, go to hospital. They're 92, 90, it's not necessarily in their interest, and we need to be able to kind of move around that. Of course, that's risk because then if it goes wrong, but in my opinion, as long as you can document why you've done it,
Mm.
okay. And the more you involve the patient in the decision about what they want to do, you're sharing that responsibility. They understand, it's all made clear. Um, and then, you should be able to defend it.
Yeah. Do you remember Len Doyle? Do you remember Len Doyle?
Yes, I quote Len Doyle.
Do
I
you?
think he was brilliant. Yeah,
So,
well,
to the listener, Len Doyle was our ethics professor at medical school.
just trying to
We did
yeah.
a song about him in one of the shows.
I don't remember the song, but there was the thing about like what if you do something and the patient he goes, it's a battery. It's a battery. If you touch them and it's a battery. Um,
Yeah, well, that kind of elderly person having a heart attack, 90 odd years old at home. Do you send them, or do you respect their wishes, and keep them at home and allow them whatever comes will come? That kind of scenario was one of something that Len would roll out, wouldn't it? It'd be something where there's some jeopardy in it. If you send them in and they get better, uh, but they don't like that, then where's your ethics there? If you leave them home and they die, but the family don't like it, then where's your ethics there? Where do you stand on that decision? That was a lovely role play he would play out in front of us.
and that's all about communication, isn't it? Because as long as, really, because it's not all about preserving life, is it? And
No.
if you accept the fact that you have a soul as well, there are circumstances in which people wouldn't want to continue their life, and sometimes we're really prolonging people's lives. Um, and if you were in that situation, you wouldn't want to have your life prolonged. So, are we doing it for them or are we doing it for us? And if we're doing it purely for us to cover our own backs, or that's not
Hmm.
should be. I mean, we've kind of lost the shamanic element, haven't we? The shaman would look after the whole tribe, and they would look after the birth, the life, the functionality, and the death, and it was all, it's all part of the circle of life, and they're looking at the well-being of the tribe as well. And we've kind of lost that element. There's brilliant books by Michelle Paver, the Wolf Brothers series, where they have lots of different tribes. It's kind of Stone Age time, and the tribes have all got a leader and they've got a mage. And the leader and the mage, they don't start at 9 and finish at 5. They're on all the time, and they have a respect which they earn. Um, but part of the reason that people respect them is because they will take responsibility and they will make decisions on behalf of the whole tribe. And in medicine, we're kind of going a bit away from that. We're kind of
Mm.
avoiding taking responsibility for stuff. And I think, it should be shared responsibility. It should be shared decision making. But when we just don't make a decision, and so somebody keeps getting carted off into hospital, And it's clearly not in their interests, but it's the easiest thing for us to do. It's the you know
Yeah, and you're
if
busy, and you've got other people that you've got to go and visit, and it's an easy decision to make. It's an easy out to get you onto the next thing. There's so many things
and,
that influence that decision making, isn't there?
and Dorothy's having the vapors somewhere.
Dorothy's having the vapors.
That's really urgent, so we have to
Yeah, absolutely.
attend
Yeah.
to that. I mean, on that note, I've got a chapter in my book, The Ascent of the Feminine. I have a big problem with benzodiazepines and barbiturates because in the past,
Not personally, I hope.
no, I've never had either of those. No, I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole. I actually have a fear of that kind of thing. Honestly, keep it away from me. But in the past, you'd have had women in like a society which was pretty dysfunctional. We should operate in tribes, shouldn't we? But instead, you've got these families, and you've got the father who's going out and going to work, and then you've got like the manic kids, and then the mother trying to look after the kids, and the father doesn't have anything to do with it, and mother's trying to deal with everything, and her husband's probably very demanding, or you know, and so she gets hysterical. And I can imagine this. This is probably me in one of my GP practice meetings going, I really can't function like this anymore. And so they're like, oh, she's a little bit hysterical. And like, are you okay, dear? The term hysteria coming from the fact that women are unpredictable because their womb floats around the body and makes them do crazy things. So, she's got a bit hysterical. Now, of course, if the women's hysteria gets to the point where he's like, she's really not functioning. My dinner's not on the table. And the children are a mess, and the kitchen's and the toilet's not clean. So there must be something. So take her to the doctor, and the doctor goes, "Oh yes, there's something wrong with her, isn't there?" And they give her benzodiazepines. Shut her up. She goes home. She's like comatose, and they're like, "Oh, she's all right now. She's okay. You've solved the problem, have you?"
That's definitely been that was definitely the case in the 80s and 70s, surely. Because I don't know about you, but when I went into my first practice as a partner, it was a small practice, maybe 8,000 patients, coastal, next to the seaside, and the amount of benzos that were prescribed to the ladies from the older time GPs, they were just throwing them around like Smarties. And the whole town was medicated. All the old ladies wandering around the streets without a care in the world. Do you know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
frightening.
It is really frightening. But so we've kind of gone off that bit now. But now what we do is, so this might be triggering for some, but we're medicating people with antidepressants because they're in a dysfunctional society. Then we've got kids who are not functioning in school because schools are rubbish because they're just told to sit still all the time. And boys particularly are not designed to sit still all the time. They're supposed to be problem solving, fighting the tiger. Who's the one who's going to see the tiger? It's the one with ADHD. It's, actually they're often quite bright, probably overloaded with foods that are not
And
helpful.
E numbers.
E numbers and whatever these drinks are, the blue drinks.
Monster.
Yeah, Monster and like what drink is blue for heaven's sake? Like what blue drink? So they're overloaded with all of this stuff. So and they're playing up. And so I mean ADHD it can be hyperactive, can't it? Or you get other children who are paying no attention, but their head's in the clouds somewhere. Probably somewhere much better, to be honest, but they don't cause a problem. But the ones who cause a problem, they have to be medicated. So we medicate them to fit the dysfunctional school system. And then so now everything, as I had a patient who came to see me with back pain, and the physio had sent her to see me because it was probably because of the menopause. So she needed some HRT for her back pain.
All right.
So whatever you've got these days, it's probably the menopause. So let's just give you, so we're not going to give them benzodiazepines now, but we'll just give them some HRT. And if that doesn't work, well, maybe we'll up the dose. And then again, I'm not saying there's no place for HRT, but I think we're being we're using these things to medicate societal, completely. Krishnamurti said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society."
Mm,
So
very
I would say that anybody who's functioning well in this society,
true.
it's worrying because actually the way it is at the moment, you should be feeling that it's uncomfortable, it's not right. There's so much wrong with society at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Um, you mentioned your book a few times, and I really want to have a talk about your book actually, because it's not normal to write a book, Gabby. how did the whole book thing come about? Did you have any imposter syndrome when you were writing it or when you were thinking about publishing it? I mean, it's one thing to write it. I imagine the imposter syndrome would kick in for me when it came to pulling the trigger on publishing it. Um, your the way what we've been talking about today, there's some themes in what we've discussed that really fly against the medical model of conventional medicine. Um, did you have any backlash about themes in your book and things like that? So tell me a little bit about this whole book, how it started,
Yeah.
and how it's ended up being what it's become.
So, I mean, in defense of the realm, it came through talking to lots and lots of patients. And, you've got your realm and you've got if you imagine all your cells in your body are subjects of your realm. And then basically you've kind of, somebody else is making use of them and you're kind of in the corner of your realm while other people are making the most of your making free with your realm. But also, you should be looking after, if you were a king and you had a load of subjects, you would make sure that they were fed and had enough water, and you would do that before you sent a load of them out to fight for somebody else. You make sure that they're all cared for. And I think, in medicine, but often people feel that they should be sacrificing themselves. And I I believe it's actually, you're given your body, and it's your duty to look after that. It was a gift, and so it's your duty to actually care for it. And just giving it up to someone else doesn't do you any favors. I mean, I believe in reincarnation. So issues that you don't deal with in this life, and this is a good reason for people, so it sounds very morbid, but not to commit suicide, because any things you don't deal with in this life, the issue will come up in the next life. So you'll just have to start all over again. So the more you can deal with, in really clearing out your realm,
Is that a Buddhist type of philosophy? Is that
well, it's Eastern philosophy generally.
right?
The soul, the immortal soul. So we come from one. You come from source. Now, some people would call source God. Um, and that is semantics, really, whatever you want to call it, but
Mm.
God is a good way of looking at it, actually. So we all come from source, and it's all like, so if that's a big ball of flame, then we're all little sparks, so we're all part of that, and ultimately we all go back to that. So that is a foregone conclusion. We will all at some point go back to it, but we're on this karmic wheel until we realize that we are actually divine beings. And it's not until we've cleared it all out, and got rid of all our stuff, that we can then realize that self-realization, realizing. So Jesus was a master of himself. He had mastered his realm. He had mastered his emotions. He'd mastered all of that. And so he, that's that line, make me a pillar in your kingdom, and I won't have to come out again, means that I won't have to come back to this earth to learn. So earth is like, it's a school where you learn lessons.
Mm.
And so that, the philosophy is that everything that happens to you in life is a lesson. So if you can look at it as a lesson, and you either learn from the lesson and move on, or basically, if you don't learn from the lesson, it will come up, it will come up, it will come up again, again, again. So if you get into a particular dynamic with an abusive person, that will happen over and over and over and over and over again until you realize what's going on, change the dynamic, and then that's done. You've dealt with
Mm.
that. You can then
Mm.
move to the next thing. So yeah, it's Eastern philosophy generally. And I think so many people in sort of secular Britain, in the West, have decided they don't like the concept of God, because what they're taught is, which is the church, if you do something wrong, you'll be damned. You'll be to purgatory, you'll never be forgiven. Original sin, you're all sinners, you're all miserable sinners anyway. So, like, look at you. She's like crawling around on the floor, and that was such a negative thing, isn't it? And a lot of people, I think, just go, I don't believe in a God who just you mess up and he sends you to hell. But that's, so Jesus didn't actually teach that. So Paramahansa Yogananda and his guru Swami Sri Yukteswar looked at basically all the great religions have the same fundamentals at the basis of them, until you stick all the dogma on top, all the rules and the dogma. And they're all, they're just rules that essentially, again, you're acceptable if you're following the rules, and if you're not, then you're outside. But Jesus didn't follow the rules, did he? He did his own thing. When the scribes and the Pharisees said he shouldn't be doing stuff, he ignored them and carried on doing his own thing. Yeah, so they saw that basically all the world religions are exactly the same. And Paramahansa Yogananda did a commentary on both the Bhagavad Gita and the New Testament of the Bible, and basically draws out all the references to reincarnation and every individual's divinity. So the idea is not that so Christ, when Jesus said, "Nobody gets to the Father except through me," what he was talking about was Christ consciousness. So that's the same as Krishna in Hindu faith. He had Christ consciousness. So Jesus had Christ consciousness, but we're all capable. So if you look at Buddha and all of the other enlightened masters, they attained Christ consciousness, which is something that everybody can do. And it's all in the Bible.
Right.
Hidden because, of course, they didn't want us to know that, because that would empower us, and that would mean that we don't just do as we're told all the time. There was a book I read called Mary and Early Christian Women by a lady called Ali Katouche, who is a sort of a historian, and she goes through all the scriptures, artwork, architecture. Basically, she looks at all the evidence which shows that women in the early church were as powerful as men. They were just as important. They would preach, they would do everything, but basically it was written out of the Bible. So the power of women was completely written out of the Bible, and it's not in there.
Wow.
And a friend of hers said, so her friend, I don't know if she was in South America, but she'd been in an abusive relationship. Her husband was very abusive to her, and she went to the priest, and the priest said, "Be submissive like the Virgin." And of course that's the image that we have in the Bible. It's all, we should be like the Virgin Mary and, be submissive and do as we're told. What they don't tell us is that Mary Magdalene, there's a lot of propaganda about Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene was probably as important as Jesus. And they worked. She was, according to the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, she was the most advanced of his disciples.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So then we're saying, but of course, Mary of Magdala was powerful. She was passionate, and they don't want power and passion and the intuitive elements coming to the fore. They want to do as we're told, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's raining really heavily. I don't know if you can
No,
hear
not at all. No. I mean, this is absolutely, I like we said before we started, I have no idea where this conversation is going. I did not expect to be talking about theology and
It's absolutely fascinating when you look at it. And so if you see that they completely wrote women's power out of the Bible, then you're like, well, what else have they written out of the Bible? And obviously they've written out reincarnation. They've written out the fact that you have the same capacity to achieve enlightenment as Jesus and Buddha and Krishna and all of the other enlightened masters. So Swami Sri Yukteswar and Paramahansa Yogananda particularly sort of brought those things together to basically, the message from that is you're not a miserable sinner. And most of the reason that we behave badly is because we believe we are, because we've been taught that we are. And when you realize that you're not, that you're actually made in the image of God as God intended you to be, you are a spark of the divine flame. You are a diamond covered in all of the rubbish that we accumulate because we don't think that we're good enough. If you realize that you're actually that wonderful, beautiful person, then you don't have to behave badly to other people because you don't feel inadequate. You don't feel, most of the reason that people behave badly is because fundamentally they believe that they're not good enough, that they're worthless, or, so somebody else is bound to do me down, or I won't survive unless I play dirty because I'm just not good enough. And if people realize that we're actually fundamentally good and then actually behave nicely as well, and stand up for ourselves and others. Sorry, I'm going on again.
No, it's fine. I mean, I didn't realize from the bits that I've read in your book that it had such a grounding in theology. I thought this is probably incredibly naively, that a lot of your book was written to parallel life in medicine and the medical profession being the realm and the way that the true medical practice should be defended, and rather than it being impacted by
Yeah,
all the guidance and all the stuff
yeah,
that we have to deal with. And I thought I realized there was a personal, not personal, but like a societal story, and I thought there was a parallel that tied it with the medical thing too.
yeah. So, I mean, essentially, I think that you can't actually properly address the issues in medicine if you ignore the spiritual. And the kind of spiritual legacy that we've got in the West is very distorted and unhealthy. But when you sense check that with the Eastern philosophies, actually, and it fits entirely as well with the sort of Native American wisdom. We all come from one. We are part of the land. And they would, a lot of these tribes, they would kill an animal and then they would thank the animal, and there'd be kind of like, oh, we'll have the chicken breast and we'll just chuck the rest of the chicken away. It would be like, well, not that they had chickens, it was mainly buffalo, wasn't it? But they would use every part of it as respect, and there's an appreciation for what you're given. I mean, the way that our consumer society is horrendous now, isn't it?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
just buy and throw away. And part of that is just because we're so busy, we don't have time to do things properly. But I think life has got so all of these things that are brought in to make our lives easier, more convenient. Like, for example, if you do the washing up, you might do it with someone else and have a laugh with them while you're doing it. Or you're standing looking out the window thinking about something. There's thundering now out there.
right.
Um, if if you just stick everything in the dishwasher and then you go off to do another job, you don't get that time to just think, contemplate life. That's when you actually take stock. Am I jumping through the right hoops? Are these the hoops that I want to be jumping through? Am I doing something meaningful in life? Why was it that that patient upset me or that person upset me? Is there something in me that I need to look at? Is there something those are all things that we do when we have time to contemplate while we're doing something, sewing maybe. Not my forte, but and men used to go. I don't actually know. This thought occurred to me the other day. A lot of men used to go fishing and spend hours just talking,
Yeah,
being quietly,
getting away from the women.
away from the women. Yeah, it's fine. We all need time away from each other to maintain quality. But I don't know whether they take their phones now. Are they sat on their phones while they're waiting for the fish to bite?
Yeah, that would be a shame, wouldn't it? Because a lot of the reason to do it would be gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
When
mean,
you how long did it take you to write your book?
I started it before COVID. Obviously it developed over years of me saying the same stuff. And then I thought I just need to write it down. So I started writing the kind of first chapters of it before COVID. And then, dynamics and things during COVID kind of crystallized it a lot more. And then after COVID, with all the, fear and anxiety and stuff, it was like, I need to get this book out there now. And as I say, I don't think that medicine can solve the problems. We need to be thinking outside of the box.
Mm.
When people look at the issues in medicine and they say, oh, we'll just bring in AI to solve the problems. AI has no humanity. So it's really dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous. It will be computer says no. It'll be no, you've been on this like protocol. If you're a GP and you've got a patient who they might be on palliative care, but something happens that's a bit different that you think, well, actually, they still might benefit from going into hospital, or actually in this situation, it might be helpful. But I've seen so many patients that they've said they don't want to be admitted to hospital. So the GP, so I had this for the visiting service and I handed back to the GP. They don't want to go into hospital. So I've done this, but if you could check up on them in a couple of days. When I look back at the notes, someone had phoned them up, documented, does not want to go into hospital, leave it at that. Like,
Mm.
not wanting to go into hospital doesn't mean no care.
Yeah,
Does So there's so much of that I think, we really need to be addressing. And AI, much as it's being sold as the solution to our problems, it's not. It's going to be like the checkouts. So if they get AI doing our jobs, and the more we function like an algorithm, the more they'll be like, well, we don't need you anymore because the computer can do that. It's our humanity that makes us different. Yes, as humans, we make mistakes, but our humanity is what, human connection. What's it all about being here
mm,
on the earth? If there's no human connection, what's the point?
exactly. Yeah, completely agree with that. And there's a long way to go with AI before it's good for repetitive tasks, and it's good. It still can't think independently, So if you ask it something, or ask it to do something, or devise something for you, it basically scours a load of information and spits the information out. So its output is reliant on what it can read. It's not reliant on independent thought, and that is where the issue is, and where the humanity is, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, so and it can't have original thought, so it
Mm,
can only churn out what everyone has already said. So everybody used to say that the earth was flat. So AI at that point in time would have said the earth is flat. It wouldn't,
exactly that. Yeah.
it would just churn out the same stuff. That talk with Ian Gilchrist and Matthias Desmet, they talked about the rational side of the brain, that takes logical decisions. If you follow the logical decisions to the end of the road, inevitably it ends up somewhere completely ridiculous. And it's only the other side, the more sort of emotional, intuitive part of the brain that goes, that's ridiculous. Hang on, how did you get there? We need to take a few steps back and work this out, and that's where your inspiration comes in. Um, and then we develop new ideas. I mean, basically, if we keep everything as binary, um, there'll be no creativity, will there? There'll be no
Mm,
original. Um,
exactly. Yeah.
and then we'll be machines. And
Yeah. Well,
what
where's
in
the
that?
humanity in that? Yeah. Well, so was the plan to always publish it?
Uh, yes, yes, it was. And I think I've said to other people, it kind of wrote itself. There were bits that were kind of in my head, and I'm just like, well, I just got to write this down. And as you said, you kind of think, you know, actually, two of my favorite words at the moment are heretic and rebel.
Right.
So there's stuff in there that is heretical and rebellious.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that is, you're kind of like, well, how will people take that? And I think there's quite a resistance to the idea of spirituality in medicine. There's a big
Very
brigade
much.
say, no, we just follow the rules. It's not about humanity. It's just about clinical need. But I really feel that when you're behaving in that way, instead of having in the past, so people would have had God as their kind of compass, and now instead we've put pharmaceutical companies on that pedestal, and
Mm,
we're bowing to the pharmaceutical companies, like we'll do whatever you tell us to do.
mm.
Um,
Well, people might say we're not, but actually, if you think about it, what as a generalism, as a metaphor, we are bowing to proxies of the pharmaceutical companies, be that NICE or whatever other guidelines, because these guidelines are devised based on evidence, and the evidence, where does that majority of the time come from? It comes from pharmaceutical companies or studies around their products. So whichever way you slice it, that as a metaphor, you're absolutely right.
And do you remember that BMJ article there was that it was in one of the Christmas editions, and they said, we've decided nobody's ever done a randomized control trial about jumping out of a plane with a parachute or not. We're going to propose that we do a trial. Now, of course, you never do a trial of that, do you? Because you're like, it's blooming obvious. It's like going out in nature. Of course, it makes you feel better.
Yeah.
Interacting with other people. There have actually been trials on that, and isolation is bad for your immune system. It's bad for your mental health. It causes physical health problems. So there is some information about it, but it's not funded by drug companies. And if you don't have massive amounts of money behind you, you can't fund the studies to show that basic stuff like taking time to have lunch when you're on a long shift,
Mm,
taking time to debrief with people, there's not massive amounts of funding going into that stuff. And the placebo effect. So I
Hmm.
had a brilliant lecture on the placebo effect years ago. So in most trials, they'll say this is the placebo group, this is the improvement that the placebo group had, this is the improvement that the drug group had. So look, isn't our drug good?
Yeah,
And
because
you're
it's
like,
slightly better than placebo.
can I not just have the placebo? Because that looks pretty good.
Mm.
And what's going on with the placebo effect? It's not, it's not nothing, is it? It's something. Doctor is drug. The drug, the doctor can have a massive impact on how the patient is. My dad, I remember him saying that he always used to try and make a patient feel better when they walked out the door than when they came in, even if they had a terminal diagnosis. Or he went to visit them and then he'd leave the house and um, he just, make them feel better than, I mean, of course you can't always do that. You can't always do that, but bringing a bit of joy into somebody's life
Mm.
is healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and when I think about my career and the people that, because when you could progress from junior doctor, do all your jobs and all the rest of it, you've always got a supervisor or somebody that is more senior than you that you're supposed to look up to and learn from. And when I think about the things that I've learned and the things that I adopted into my practice, it was always from people that were slightly gregarious, that had good energy, and they weren't robots sat at a computer. What's wrong with you? All right, okay. When did that start? It was not about that. I always used to welcome people in with, "Hello, come on in, have a seat. What can I do you for today?" And just try and have much more energy in the consulting
Yeah.
department. And that seemed to work very well for me. And it was those behaviors that I would take from people that I would shadow and follow. And those were the same behaviors I would try to implement into my trainees when I had them. And another thing, coming right the way back to something we mentioned earlier on, is there's so much stuff in the consulting room, and you don't know whose stuff is whose. I always used to say to my trainees, it's not your monkey. And they would often say, "Well, what does that mean?" I would say, "Well, everybody comes in with a problem, and their problem is this monkey. And they've got this problem, and they live with this monkey that's their problem all the time. And it's causing havoc, this monkey. And they come into the consulting room and they go, ugh, and now it's on you. So you're the doctor and you've got this monkey for 10 minutes and you're trying to sort it out. But whatever you do, don't take their monkey home with you. You know, give them their monkey back at the end of the consult so that you can then look after somebody else's monkey for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just a way of stopping that transference of shit from people's shit life syndrome that you get to see over and over and over again. And it
Yeah.
stops you taking it home with you.
Yeah, and you end up with a bunch of monkeys in your living room at home and you're not even aware. And so I had a brief conversation with somebody the other day who was saying by text that she needs to improve her consulting skills because she's clearly too slow. And so she needs to do some brushing up on her consulting skills. And I'm thinking, yeah, or is there just too much demand? You're blaming yourself for the situation, but actually it's an abusive system, the
Mm,
NHS. I
yeah.
mean,
It is. The last podcast episode that was released this week actually was Dr. Al Zubadi, who's on this morning, is one of the TV doctors, and he was saying that his he came up with the phrase whack-a-mole medicine because he got so sick of 10 minutes because you can't do anything in 10 minutes but be reactive. So all you do is you just whack the mole that's up in
yeah.
that 10 minutes and then another one pops out, but you haven't got the time. So you have to come back again and, you whack that mole down.
Because you saw that patient 10 times and you whacked them all every time. So that's brilliant. Whereas the doctor who decided that they'd actually deal with the problem, they only saw them once. So they weren't very productive, were they?
Yeah.
You've got this
And they
stupid.
overran that day.
Sorry?
And they overran the clinic that day.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's crazy because it doesn't look good. The more patients you see, the better.
Mm,
But actually, if you're doing if you're doing things well, then hopefully some of them don't have to come back because you empower them to deal with the monkey themselves again.
yeah, absolutely. So what's next for Gabby then?
Well, actually, this afternoon I'm going to my clinic in Havant, and there's lots of changes happening in my clinic, which is, I said this morning, labour pains going on today as the clinic is rebirthed, so it's all a bit painful. But obviously, so I'm seeing patients privately for, I would say, homeopathy and insights, as to where their life is, where it's going wrong. And the thing is, when it's ourselves, it can be difficult to get a good perspective on it, isn't it? So when you talk to someone else and they go, well, clearly that's not functional, and then they go, oh yeah. So I'm offering that as well. At the moment, I'm doing a maternity locum at a lovely practice in Southampton, which finishes in October. So um, really, I want to be concentrating on the writing and the private work. So obviously, there's In Defense of the Realm, which is out. It's on Amazon, Waterstones, but you can also go into any independent bookstore and request it.
Do you
And
have
then
your own website for this stuff?
so yeah, the website's being sort of changed as well. But if people look up Gabriella Day, Dr. Gabriella Day, they'll find me anyway. So yeah, it
And will
should
they
be.
be able to book a private appointment to have their...
Yeah, so they'll be able to, yeah, if they go to drgabrielladay.com, they'll be able to see contact details for me on there. And yeah, and book an appointment for stuff like this. I
Yeah,
mean, sometimes you kind of feel sometimes you might just be chatting about life. It's kind of like a chat that you might have. I saw a thing once outside a pub. It says, there's a therapy group, happens every week, Thursday night in the bar. So just chatting stuff through can actually be really therapeutic sometimes. So that's part of it, but obviously the homeopathy as well. Heart-based medicine, and of course, heart-based medicine is not cardiology. It's about checking in how you're practicing medicine with the heart. And then the next one so far, which is nearly done, is restitution, rebalancing the art and science in medicine, and looking at all these concepts of how we should be thinking more holistically, but also about the dysfunction. It's kind of my kind of ideas about how we need to do things differently. And then I have a vague idea for another book after that. Non-political musings from a non-expert, because what do I know?
yeah, that's brilliant.
I'm not sure whether that will go anywhere, but that will basically be me just giving my
It's just an excuse to rant, that, isn't it?
excuse to rant. But rants really. So when I was in my partnership, I didn't used to do it in the mornings so much, but in the afternoons I'd see a patient and then come out into reception and I'd be like, oh, this has happened and that's happened. And they'd just go, they'd laugh at me. And then I'd go back in and see the next one. And then I'd come out and go, oh my God, you wouldn't believe this. And yeah, but it's really therapeutic, isn't it? To just offload stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. So we know where to find you,
Yeah.
drgabrielladay.com.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And,
stay tuned. And you're also on Instagram. No, you're not on Instagram. You're on
I am
LinkedIn.
actually on Instagram, but yeah, I'm not sure how much is on there. But
Right.
I'm on
But
LinkedIn and I'm on
LinkedIn.
Facebook, Dr. Gabriella Day, homeopathy on Facebook. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'd like to think that I've got a slightly different take, a different outlook. There's certain ways of doing things. There's certain ways that people have always done things and that we just keep doing some. But the definition of stupidity is just keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
So if
Absolutely.
if that's going on in life and you keep doing the same thing, you're trying really hard and that you just can't get through, homeopathy and other complementary therapies and this kind of way of thinking is about, let's think outside the box. If we're not getting where we want to get to, what's stopping you? What's holding you back? And work on that.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, Gabby, it's been absolutely phenomenal to
It's
chat with you.
great, so great to catch up. It's
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, a lot of water under the bridge, but
Yeah, that we haven't even touched on.
yeah, yeah, well, yeah. There's
Yeah,
probably lots more that we could talk about,
I'm
but
sure there is.
not for everybody.
Yeah. Well, when the next book comes out, I'd love you to come back and we can talk about your next book.
Amazing. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Gabby, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.